Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 123. I'm your host, Basa J. Waiting with me, my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be doing an episode on the results of calling Shizuoka, calling Hamburg, and PQ Week 1 results. We're recording on the Monday, so these are all pretty fresh information that we have today, and we'll try and get this out as quickly as possible. But before we do that, how did your PQ weekend go, Yuki? Did you play some PQs?
Yeah, so I went to Bellingham, which is in the US, but it's only about an hour, 20 minutes or so with the border, which is not too bad at all. So we went to that. It was actually really funny because it was quite small. Bellingham's basically between Seattle and Vancouver. And normally we get a lot of the Seattle folks up to the Bellingham PQ and we see them there, but apparently there was one in Tacoma, which is about maybe 45 minutes from Seattle, an hour from Seattle, depending on traffic. A lot of the people went to that one instead. So it was basically 11 people from Vancouver in our 16-player PQ in Bellingham, which was pretty funny. Jay was also there. I ended up taking Syndra. I went 4-1 in Swiss, losing to Arachne Marionette, who ended up making semifinals. It was top four. It was a cut to top four since we had 16. So they were first seed. I was second seed. And I actually conceded in my semifinals to a friend and a local for a variety of reasons. Yeah, we can get to that in just a minute. But yeah, that was my weekend. I had a lot of fun. I got my gold foil overcrowded. I enjoyed the event. Pretty happy with it. I didn't play the Sunday. I actually just got home from the PQ, went to sleep, woke up, and was like, I'm sick. I don't know exactly where I got sick or how that happened, but yeah, I'm still a little bit sick.
Unfortunately, you got sick, but congratulations on your top 4. I played the same PQ. I actually played in 2 PQs this weekend. I went to the Bellingham one, and then the day after, we drove all the way down to Seattle, which is 3 hours instead of 1, and we played that. And this week, I played Florian and Syndra. Played Florian in the Bellingham one, went 0-3. Felt kind of bad, but it's how it goes sometimes. And then I went down to Seattle, and I played Syndra. And I went 0-2, so I just started this weekend with 0-5. Yeah, I don't know. Doing a lot of losing this weekend.
Yeah, stuff. Hopefully I'll have a better weekend.
Yeah, I think both of the decks felt actually really, really good, and I was kind of okay losing all of those games. I think the Florian games into Gravy, it was pretty close. One of them was not, but the other one was kind of close. And when I played the Syndra, it was kind of close on all the games, except the Syndra games I lost because I got double erase-faced when I didn't want to get erase-faced. And I'm just oh, yeah, erase-face is really good, into Syndra.
It's funny. Erase Face is either really good into Syndra or it does nothing, and then you feel really dumb for playing it. And you kind of don't know which one you're going to get until the Syndra plays their hand. But yeah, there are spots where it's absolutely crushing. And then other times they're just okay, Rabble, pop a fealty on this Art of Dragonfire, cut through, Lava Burst, and you're just yeah, okay.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's just the hand that I specifically had required my hand to be draconic, and then I'm just oh my god, it just took 5 from the previous attack, and then ended on an erase face, so blocked for 6. Looked at my hand, and I'm well, if I swing the dagger, it's gonna go to the graveyard, and then I'm just kind of stuck, or I can send a lava burst for 2. So I just IP2 penalty myself, drew 2. And then they played Erase Face again, and I'm just no, what am I doing?
Yeah. When it's good is good, is what I'll say about Erase Face. 2 block, though, so you kind of always have to resolve it, and you gamble a bit when you resolve it. But yeah, that was our PQ weekend. I guess something I want to touch on, since we're talking about PQs, is this is sort of our first PQ season with the new changes in mind, with basically, once you win a PQ, you're not able to play future PQs. We talked about this on the podcast. You can hear our full thoughts on that episode. I don't remember the exact number, but it was maybe about a month ago. We talked about this at length. But what I will say is that after experiencing this in practice, I was already a little skeptical of this change. And after experiencing it in practice, I think I can say firmly that I am not a fan. I think I've heard more discussions around concession with this system than I ever did in the past. It's only week one, so I played one PQ. Could maybe it's just that one PQ, but I do hear a lot of discussion around it, and I think it's just awkward that like you basically have this situation where like it doesn't make sense for people to concede if they care about winning the PQ, but not everybody cares equally about winning the PQ. For example, some people might know that they can't go to Shizuoka, so they would rather get stuff like store credit, be able to play more PQs, get a chance at more swing bigs and overcrowdeds. And it's sort of weird where I think the top 8 and top 4 promos are really sweet. We used to have really solid PQ pricing for top 8, and that kind of went by the wayside. And I think returning to that is actually super positive. I'm a huge fan of that. But it does create this weird incentive where, like, if you are a player that just wants to play PQs and you're pretty strong, but you're not going to the PT, the optimal thing to do is just get to top 4 and concede to people, because then you get to play more PQs. And yeah,
Why is it top 4 that you want to concede?
because in finals you have to fight over who wants to concede. I mean, you could technically get to finals and concede as well, but like either way, I just think it's like, I guess top 4 is because where the overcrowded is, right?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on why top 4 because I had this discussion with like other people because we have exactly Yuki and Edison in our area, which both top 32 the last Pro Tour, which means they're queued for Shizuoka already. That means the invite passes down. We had this discussion in the car of like, if we get to the finals against Edison or Yuki, there are strats to try and concede the finals before they do. And like that was a whole discussion point that we talked about for like 30 minutes in the car going down to Bellingham.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a healthy system.
I don't think so either. I've heard some like counterpoints on social media. Some people say like, well, in the future they're not going to let qualified players play, so that removes this. And I think that removes this exact case that we're talking about, but I think it doesn't remove what I was talking about some players maybe not caring about going to PQs. And then there's a lot of like, well, I really don't want to win because then I don't get to play more PQs. I also think that like, I've also heard the response of like, well, if both people want to concede, then the judge can just write it as a double loss. There's no invite, there's no gold foil, and like they send the gold foil back. But like, at least at the PQs I go to, I can't imagine many of the local judges actually enforcing this rule. And I also think that even if this is the solution and judges do enforce it, if you have a finals game that neither player wants to play and your solution is to strong arm players into playing it, like there's something wrong with that system. Like that's just not good. like even if this is like a solution that sort of works in theory, the fact that people are talking about this is just like a symptom of the system being bad. I kind of think that because like people care about different things when it comes to ProQuest. Like some people care about the invite, some people care about store credit, some people just care about value, some people just like want to play games and have that competitive experience. You're just going to have people conceding kind of no matter what system you use. And just, why don't we have a system that doesn't create these feels bads when like, oh, I won, I don't get to play anymore, and oh, I want to like go on a trip that I have planned for next week because I have a trip planned to go to the island, and that's part of why I conceded. Is like, well, I bought a ferry ticket to the island to go to a PQ, and if I win, I'm just going to be on my own while all my friends play their PQ. So like, I'm just going to concede in semifinals because like, why would I don't know. Then my friend gets a chance to get an invite, then I get to play the PQ next weekend and not have to sit around. It's just like better for everyone involved, but like that just also feels really stupid at the same time.
It's pretty true. I think, yeah, I don't like the system. I think in practice, it's like really really bad. In philosophy, it was like it didn't sound too bad, but oh man, in practice, it actually is like kind of outrageous of like what's actually happening.
Yeah, it just feels like not in the spirit of what they're hoping for at all. And you can criticize players for this, but like, I don't know. Every system has its flaws, and I think this one has quite a few flaws, is sort of my opinion.
Yeah, I think I was like scrolling through like Twitter this weekend, and then I just like saw like 3 or 4 posts have been like, I conceded top 4, I conceded top 4, I conceded finals, and I'm like, Oh yeah, I guess this is what kind of happens in the system.
Yeah, and I assume like later, like when it's the end of the season, there will be less of this. But still, like if the first half of the season this is happening, it's sort of
Is it? I don't even know if that's gonna be true. I feel like it's still gonna keep happening, right? Because like,
the last PQ you don't really need to concede because then there's no PQs that you can't play, right? And then the second last PQ is like not to say that you will definitely concede it, but it's lower. It's like not as costly to concede it because all you're giving up is one progress. Whereas if you win the first one, you're potentially giving up like however many other PQs you're going to play, like four or whatever the number is. You're giving up like a lot of PQs, so it becomes less and less costly to win as the season goes on.
but the
Stupid.
point. Sorry, but the point where you said like if you don't want to go to Shizuoka anyways, like you're probably still going to just like give the opponent the win if it's like if they want the invite.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That may still happen. I guess what I mostly mean is like you if they are keen on playing for the gold foil, like you might be incentivized to play for the gold foil.
Oh yeah, that would make sense. Yes, yes, the gold foil is worth something. That's the other thing. I feel like the gold foil first place prizing is kind of getting a little bit not as appealing as what it used to be. I think just in the fact of like the market for these are been like kind of going down and it's been harder and harder to sell every year like just like common gold foils unless you want it for yourself, right? The value of me trying to like win a gold foil to try and like sell it is like significantly worse from what it was when the PQ season first started and like 3 years ago when you got a gold foil and like there were like a bunch of people trying to buy them for like 400 $500. Now you're like kind of lucky if you got $200 for it, right?
Also, like this sort of is compounded by like the swing big and overcrowded promos being pretty good. I don't know exactly like what their prices are or what they're settle at, but either way, they're both like eminently CC playable cards with fancy treatments, and people tend to like those. So I think you have this like risk reward of like, well, if I keep playing more, I get more chances at swing bigs and overcrowdeds. And for some players, getting to top eight is something that they can do fairly regularly. So I don't even think it's that unrealistic to be like, well, I'm going to try and get swing bigs and overcrowdeds, and like maybe at the end of the season, I'll try and win. If you're somebody that's if you really want your invite, you're not in that boat. But if you're somebody that doesn't really care,
Let's move on and talk about the other news that came out from LSS. Emergency bans is what it feels like for the Living Legend system. Came out of left field. I don't know when this goes in effect. Does it go in effect this week?
yes, immediately. So if you have LLPQs, you're probably already aware of this, but there have been some kind of last minute sudden changes to LL. Basically, what they said was they were going to wait till the end of the season. Then they realized there's hardly any LLPQs, and players aren't very comfortable preparing for LL because the format's just so unknown. So rather than wait to get more data and make a more informed decision, they feel like they can make an informed enough decision now and then give players more time to prep for Worlds. It was like kind of the reasoning they gave, which I think makes a lot of sense and I'm quite grateful for as somebody prepping for Worlds. The LO changes are Warmongers has been unrestricted. This is meant to keep Runeblades and Dash.io in check, as aggro decks were extremely good in LL. Zephyr Needles has been banned. This is because Ira was one of the top performing decks, and also Zen. I think that this ban effectively kills Ira. I don't think Ira has any game in this format anymore, if I had to guess. I haven't tried it, but I can't really imagine what you're doing because Ira's fully on the Zephyr Needles retrieve thing. And Zen is probably still playable, but probably worse for not having Zephyr Needles. And then finally, we have CYB ban. I think combination of them saying that basically CYB doesn't really deal with a lot of the aggro decks in the format because it's a little bit too slow, and then but it does beat everything in the middle. And also with the potential like untimed rounds and CYB, they're like maybe we don't need to do this. I like seeing CYB go. Honestly, it really did feel like it really pushed you to either be like the hyper defensive CYB deck or the hyper aggressive I'm going to blow you up in a couple of turns deck. And basically everything in the middle just is kind of impossible because like you have to deal with aggro, but then there's also just this like, I don't know, inevitable CYB deck that's like also playing Drone of Brutalities and is just going to like definitely fatigue you no matter what you do. So yeah, I think making those poles of the format, the extremes being slightly less far apart, is probably good for format diversity.
I think CYB is actually restricted, not banned, right? Which is a slight difference.
Yeah, very funny. You can play one copy of CYP. So you can play a 2-cost gain 3 life at red.
Yeah, I think this means that. Oh yeah, you can play one of each, right?
No, maybe.
No, it says sorry. Restricted. The following cards are restricted in Living Legend format. A register deck can contain up to one copy of a restricted card, so you can play one Count Your Blessing.
Yeah. So it's like technically not banned, but effectively a ban because I don't think anyone's going to play this card.
Yeah. That's kind of funny that it's you can play one copy. It's like legendary now.
Yeah, it's just like the funniest restriction of all time. I laughed pretty hard when I read it. Yeah, it's a pretty big shakeup to the format. I'm a little bit disappointed in the Zephyr Needle ban. I think Ira was a good deck, but fairly. It didn't feel oppressive to me. And I think that having Fab's first deck be part of LL was, or first hero be part of LL is like just was kind of cool. So I'm a little bit sad about the Zephyr Needles ban, and we'll see exactly what happens. But initial impressions, Starvo seems good in LL. Basically everything else got a hit, and he can run Warmongers into the Rune Blades now. So he always could, he always did, but now you can run 3 basically. So that probably makes at least your chain matchup a lot better. And probably your Briar matchup as well. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but potentially Starvo looking pretty strong.
There's a lot of different heroes in Living Legends. I've been hearing that the format's currently really diverse. We'll see how much it narrows down by the PT, but I don't know where people are testing. It's probably a lot of like super small testing teams that kind of like working on it within themselves, but it'll be kind of interesting to see what people will come up with. There must be some combination of cards that are just like, beyond unfair in this format.
Yeah. There's definitely plenty of extremely powerful things to be doing. Yeah. Starvo's like not even clearly the best deck now with like the Crown of Seeds ban, and this is a guy that gets to like Oaken old people. He gets to cripple and crush people with +2 go again and dominate. He gets to spinal crush people, and he also gets to play Felling of the Crown now. So it's just like deck's pretty good. And there's decks that can keep up with this, which is like crazy, right? So
Well, decks can keep up with it because Oakenode is at 1, Crippling Crush is at 1, right?
yeah. True.
Yeah, I love some randomly getting screenshots from people being like, "Yo, look at my Talishar results," and it's like 2 turns, and on the second turn, they're like the value of their hand section says 60, and I'm like, "Huh, I see. You had a turn 2 60-point damage turn. That's kind of insane."
Yeah. I had a game like that. It was 11, 11, 55.
Yeah. Living Legend is a crazy format.
Been quite a bit of fun, but yeah, curious to see where we go for Worlds. Anyways, before we jump into our main topic, I just want to do a really quick Patreon shout out. If you're interested in supporting us, you can check us out on patreon.com/onthebobble. And I wanted to thank all of our patrons who give back to the show. The Discord has really been popping off lately. There's been a lot of support and a lot of enthusiasm for the content we've been putting out. And we just really appreciate all of you. We couldn't be doing what we've been doing and putting out regular content like we've been doing without all of you doing that. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of our listeners, even if you're not able to subscribe and give back. We still appreciate you tuning in each week and enjoying the show. On Patreon, there was the KO deck list, how to play, plus sideboard guide. All of that is live with updates for PQ season. And this week, I'm planning to post a Syndra deck list with a sideboard guide, and I believe it should be posted within the next day or two. So probably before this episode is released, or if you're listening to this, keep an eye out for it if it's not out, because it should be out very shortly. Last thing to mention, the podcast is sponsored by Invasion. This is invasioncnc.ca. They're one of the largest Canadian retailers for Flesh and Blood singles. And if you want to buy Flesh and Blood singles from them, you can use the code YLB5 for a 5% discount on checkout for all of your Flesh and Blood singles. So, yeah.
Perfect. Then let's move on and talk about calling Shizuoka. So, this one was a reasonably large calling. It had 306 people attending, and I guess let's start with the day one breakdown. Most played hero KO 44 players, Florian at 42, and then Syndra, Gravy, Verdance in the middle, like 29 to 22 players on those. And then there was a bunch of different heroes. I'm not gonna name them all, but like there's 23 different heroes that are just like, there's a couple of people playing them. And so a very diverse meta, at least for week one calling for this Super Slam format.
And I think so this is now 2 weeks ago, but going into this, KO was a deck a lot of people were talking about. Florian was a deck that we saw a huge resurgence of after the Germinate unban. So those being most represented makes sense. And then I think we kind of talked about Syndra and Verdance being strong players in the format. And Gravy was a bit of a surprise. We talked about last week that we thought Gravy would still be relevant and that he would be able to overcome the bans, but it might be a few weeks down the road. Well, it turns out that Gravy is already kind of figured out and people have kind of gotten their week one. So yeah, Gravy Bones still a very good hero. And we see that in the top 8. So fast forwarding to the top 8 of Shizuoka, we have 2 Gravy Bones, 2 Syndras, a Florian, a KO, a Verdance, and a Rhinar.
Yo, Rhinar. It's kind of sick.
Yeah, very cool. We saw this guy play on stream and he really seemed like a brute player through and through. He did not care. He did not do very much blocking outside of equipment. And he ran very, very fast at his opponents with lots of Intimidate and Blood Rush Bellows. It looked honestly kind of terrifying to play against. He had like Wild Rides and Pulpings in his Rhinar deck and he's just like playing a bunch of blues that are whiffs, but you're holding a bunch of 6s and the top card might be a 6. And even if it's not, like your odds are pretty good. So you get there most of the time, and that kind of felt like the type of Rhinar deck that he was playing. It was like unbeaten trackers and super aggressive and very, very exciting. If you haven't watched this and you're interested in Rhinar, I would encourage you to go back and check out the coverage because his games were, pretty entertaining to watch.
I guess Rhinar is exactly like KO in the sense of like he got a lot of new support in Super Slam, right? Like the generic brute pool is like massive now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Rhinar, really big upgrades, and potentially with Earth heroes at the top, Intimidate in theory is good into Earth. So I think Rhinar kind of makes sense, and I'm curious if we will see more Rhinar in the future. I think that this is a deck that is probably not tier 1, but is maybe pretty viable in a way that he hasn't been for quite some time. So that's very cool to see.
Locally, you've seen a Rhinar being played, and some of the turns look disgusting. Unfortunately, some of the turn looks really, how do I say it, below rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh yeah, this is what Rhinar does. It's like 25 damage turns while it's intimidating like 2 times, and then other turns it's swinging like a 2 card 7 and blocking for maybe 3. Like, yeah.
Definitely a fairly high variance deck. Going to the finals, we see Gravy versus Syndra, with Syndra eventually taking it down. So a Japanese player winning the calling in Japan. Once again, Japan able to defend their calling, and Justin Koo having a very close game, almost getting there from what looked like an impossible position. He was way behind, almost gets there. So very well played by Justin, very well played by Takuya Kojima as well. And congrats to Takuya for taking down the calling. I guess some takeaways from the data. If you're wondering what data I'm talking about, Fab Blazing is the site that I am talking about. You can go to their matchup matrix, select the event that you want to look at, and it gives you a breakdown of all the heroes, how many matches they've played, and what their win percentage in each of the other heroes were. And you can do that for basically any of the callings or battle hardens out there. So we're not going to talk about everything, but a few highlights for you from calling Shizuoka was that generally KO and Florian underperformed. Those were the 2 most represented heroes, and they both had about a 50% win rate. I think Florian was like 49.5 and KO was like 48. So not abysmal, but definitely not good either. And on the other hand, we saw Syndra, Gravy, and Verdance do really well, with all of them at 56% or higher. I think it was like 56 to 57.5 was sort of the range on those 3 heroes. So those 3 heroes did extremely well. KO and Florian not so well, but they both still top aided. So it's not like a disaster for those heroes, just maybe not quite as good as people had originally thought. And that was sort of where we left off last weekend after calling Shizuoka.
Hmm. I feel like Florian is a very like it's not an easy deck to play. I think that's what it is. It's like Florian, you're gonna be winning by with like 2 life, 3 life, 1 life, something like that. All the games are gonna be close when you win with Florian, and it's like not ever gonna be like a blowout. So like if you make like 1 or 2 mistakes, you can like kind of lose with Florian. And then yeah, KO did underperform. As I thought this deck would be a lot better. I think it's just fair. I think that's what this is. It's like it's kind of weak to on hits like Syndra, but it doesn't do the really gross flick knife stuff later, right?
Yeah, the thing I'd say about KO is capable of doing incredibly unfair turns, like 25, 30 damage turns is not unusual for the deck, but it's not all the time either. And because the deck has to play all these no blocks to achieve it, you're really kind of like, my deck does one thing, I'm going to do the thing, and we'll see how it lines up. That means, like you said, you don't interact well with on hits. That means if you get some negative variance, it really hurts you. And yeah, the deck is just sort of in this weird spot of it can be very powerful, but it isn't just enough of the time that it kind of like ends up being like you have these games that are these really unfair blowouts where you're like, how would I ever beat KO? And so he can seem broken. But I think if you average it out over a large sample size, you're like, well, sometimes he's broken and sometimes I just kind of get to bully him.
I think KO might be the hero that would never want to play against in like Swiss rounds of a tournament, just because
Mm.
like it's not gonna be up to me, right? If I win the game or not.
Yeah, it's often very up to the KO deck. If they like 30 you twice with Blood Rush Bellows, it's just over, and then sometimes they just like discard their one of their like 3 to 5 whiffs off of a wild ride that they drew off the top, and then they just lose, or they're winning and they roll scab skins and it's a 1, and the other games they roll scab skins and it's 4 or 6 repeatedly. So there's a lot of this going on in KO, and I think overall KO pretty good deck, just not one of the best decks, a little too inconsistent.
Yeah, the consistency is where it's at. Okay, then let's quickly touch on the battle hardens before Hamburg. We had 2 battle hardens in between the callings. It's a battle harden Sonoma, and which was won by Majin Bay on Verdance versus Arachne Huntsman. Arachne Huntsman in a finals of battle hardens, sweet.
Yeah, very cool. Hunted or Hunter, I think is the card name. The D React is very good. I know some people that played against Taylor on this deck. Shout out to Taylor. Good friend of mine, and also shout out to Majin Bay as well, also a good friend of mine. So very cool to see those two meet in the finals. But yeah, apparently the silver generation and the extra deck damage is absolutely huge, and you get to, what I heard was that you get to buy back more of these equipments with your silver, and then that in turn lets you turn on more double troubles, and of course the D React also takes cards out of your deck, so it really kind of accelerates Arachne's mill strategy between the two of those things overlapping, which is really cool. I don't think Huntsman is like, the new meta deck or anything, but it's cool that it's a playable deck and you can make the finals of a battle harden now. That's really sweet.
Yeah, I've looked at the deck list recently, and it is on FabTCG if you want to find the Arachne Huntsman deck list. But it looks like a very standard Arachne Huntsman list. Nothing special, which is a good thing. That means that it can hold its ground, right? With just like the cards that it was intended to play with.
Yeah, it's very like you play the good disruptive pieces like the Assassin M's, Leave No Witnesses, Surgical, CNC, Codex. Play all of those, and then you play some of the contract cards and then some D reacts, and that's like kind of the deck. And it's just like, yep, like that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think the best card in this deck, or at least like the biggest upgrade from like all the other assassins, is Graven Call. This card like looked good when it got printed and like never saw play, but now with Hunted or Hunter, you can play Graven Call, and the card is so good. It's actually just like I think it's my favorite dagger in the deck now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's a good way to get kind of like, you have like a 3 damage weapon on the fatigue end games. You swing a dagger for 1, you swing a dagger for 2. It's 3 damage divided over 2 chain lengths. It's kind of similar to a Titan's Fist, honestly, except you also have go again after it.
Do you know what the actual insane play line at Fatigue is? Is you attack with Graven's Call with Silver up, you flick knives a Graven Call, you can buy back the Graven Calls and attack with it again for 2. Yeah, that's the big tech is you go 2-1-2, and then you end with 0 cost for 4. And then that just wins the Fatigue game.
That's really sweet. I didn't realize that was the thing. Okay, well, shout out to Majin Bei winning on Verdance. Over to Bridal Harden Osaka, which is also last weekend. Justin Ku wins on Gravy Bones versus Kazuya Murakami on Syndra. So Justin makes the finals of the calling, then a week later plays a Battle Hardened and makes the finals again, but this time wins. So shout out to Justin, clearly doing something right on Gravy Bones. And I think for people looking for Gravy Bones lists, I would look to Justin's list. It looks very well put together. A bit more defensive than we've previously seen, but yeah, seems quite well set up to deal with Syndra, and then also some of the Earth heroes are just sort of naturally Gravy's bread and butter.
It's kind of interesting to see like the Syndra losing this time. I felt like the Gravy deck was like historically kind of weak to the Syndra decks. Do you think this changed recently?
Yeah, I think that as decks have gotten, it's sort of funny because when I originally worked on Gravy at set release for the LSS article, the 0 to 80 article, I had 60 reacts in my deck. And I didn't feel like the Syndra matchup was all that bad. I also had a bunch of other reds. The deck looks quite different than Justin's deck. I don't want to say he's just playing my deck. That's not at all the case. What I will say is I was on 60 reacts and I felt like it made the Syndra matchup pretty reasonable. And I think that is the biggest thing that we are seeing is that with Tipple gone and less ability to be just like super aggressive with Tipples and Swells enabling you to draw cards off all the gold that you make with said Tipples. That's not really an option anymore. You need to play more of this kind of like slow, grindy, value-based gameplay. And I think that actually does line up better into Syndra. And I think that's sort of what we're seeing here. We're seeing Gravy with much better defensive options and your allies are still really above rate. So yeah, I think that's what we're seeing in operation.
Okay. So there's like the less number of 2 blocks and the more number of 3 blocks is like actually just making the matchup playable.
Yeah, exactly. And the data does kind of support that. We see the Gravy Syndra matchup close to 50%. It depends on the exact event you look at, but it's at least close.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, no, because like that's what I was wondering. I was like, why does Syndra need to like, or like why does the data look so close? And it's just like, yeah, I think you are right. The less Tipples actually is making that matchup better for Gravy. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. All right. Ready to go on to Calling Hamburg?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So Calling Hamburg, this is after Shizuoka, same weekend as the 2 Battle Hardens we just touched on. We see a bit of a shift in the meta for sure. Syndra, most represented by far, with 93 players on Syndra out of 584 total, so quite a large calling in Hamburg. Second place is Verdance at 62, then Florian at 55, Gravy at 45, KO at 42. And then there's a drop, and there's a bunch of heroes right around 20. That's Acilio, Arachne Marionette, Dash.io, Kasai, Fang, and Victor are all close to 25 to 17 range. And then a whole bunch of other heroes, like almost every other hero in the game represented here. I'm not going to do a full count of it, but there's not, if there's heroes missing, there's not very many. I see like Max in here, Olympia, Phi, Teklo Vossen, Arachne Huntsman, like almost everything showed up to this tournament in some numbers, which is really cool.
Yeah, this is a very diverse format, and I guess diverse, but with a lot of Syndras.
Yeah, I think there's clearly a few decks at the top. Your Syndras, your Verdances, your Gravies, your Florians, and then a whole bunch of other decks that are reasonable. That's kind of how I would describe this metagame. I think this data makes a lot of sense if you look back at the Shizuoka data, right? Syndra, Verdance, both very good. You see them at the top. Gravy, still pretty represented. And Florian is still there, but took a bit of a step back. He was most represented, and now he's third most represented. And I think all of that just sort of very logical looking at Shizuoka.
Yes, I think so too. Where do you want to start? I think I think we can just start talking about the top eight right away. The top eight is kind of interesting. It is the heroes that we kind of expected. Like there's a Verdance, a Cilio, there's a one Dio, there's two Syndras. Sorry, there's two Verdances, two Syndras, a Cilio, Dio, Fang, and a Victor that sneaked in the top eight. I think the biggest thing here is there's no Florian, no Gravy.
Yeah, and I think here's where we see a little bit of a shift. I think that people kind of I think the biggest thing is with Florian underperforming, there was less Florian, and in turn, there was sort of like decks like Dash.io making a comeback because Dash.io is actually good into Syndra, reasonable into Verdance, and solid into Gravy. I think the more defensive Gravy lists are actually much closer than the Tipple heavy list that we saw before. But yeah, Dash.io actually pretty solid into those. Acilio, not so good into Syndra, but has a lot of game into Verdance and Gravy. And I think that basically a lot of these kind of aggro decks that can go over Gravy that we saw at the tail end of last meta have kind of made a bit of a resurgence. I think that's partially because of Florian going down for Dash.io, and then KO also going down in representation, making Acilio more attractive.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. The also just like I kind of love that Victor sneaked into top eight. I've been getting more and more like down on Victor in this last like couple of weeks of like playtesting it. I'm glad that somebody was able to figure out a Victor deck that kind of works in this format.
Yeah, very cool to see. I think you do have a problem in the Verdance matchup is quite bad, and the Gravy matchup is not great. Especially if a lot of these other aggro decks, your Dash.ios, your Acilios pop up, those are good matchups for Victor. So I think Victor is this type of hero where you're hoping to see certain parts of the metagame, and if you do, you can do quite well. But we do see the Victor fall to Verdance in the hands of Arthur Trehey. And if we look, we end up seeing a finals of Dash.io against Verdance, with Verdance ultimately taking down the whole event. Shout out to Arthur. Has just had an incredible run of events. Kind of burst onto the scene, winning Calling LA, I believe, on Dromai, top eighted Singapore on Gravy, and then winning a Calling on Verdance. He's just had like the last 2 years or so. Arthur has been on an absolute tear. So very cool to see Arthur winning this event.
Yeah, man, he's also winning on different heroes, which is really impressive.
Yeah, clearly just like I've played a bunch with Arthur. I know him quite well, but yeah, just a very, very strong player. I guess some kind of quick notes in the data. Again, not going through everything, but some of the takeaways. Verdance had an extremely strong showing at 59%, highest win rate hero in the event, at least of the reasonable representation. We're not touching on the like super low representation heroes because the numbers are a little dubious there. Keep in mind though that most of Team Armory was on Verdance. We saw Brody Spurlock also on Verdance, also in the top eight, and I forget who else. I think Jacob Clements was on stream on Verdance. So quite a few very strong players on Verdance. You could say that perhaps this shifts the data and helps your win rate. You could also say that if a lot of strong players on Verdance, maybe that means she's really good. So Verdance definitely looking super promising this event. And Syndra and Gravy actually not doing as well this event. Syndra at 51%. Some of that could just be being the most represented, pushing the win rate down a little bit. It's hard to be almost you're like a sixth of the field. Your win rate's probably going to be slightly more average, but also we have more counters popping up like Dash.io, so hard to say exactly what's going on there. And then Gravy we see at 53.6%, a little bit lower, and we kind of touched on that. Acilio, Dio, some of your negative matchups coming out a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe some people are like putting in more tech for Syndra now after they've seen the meta breakdown from Calling Shizuoka.
That definitely could be the case as well. You mentioned running into erase faces at your PQ. The Earth heroes are able to tech prevention effects, and yeah, I think people are definitely coming prepared for Syndra, and rightfully so. She's been having quite a run. It's also very interesting. If you look at the Syndra decks, they're all pretty different. The two lists in Shizuoka were quite different. One of them, I would say, is like fairly standard, the one that made semifinals. And then the finals list has this like huge blue base that looks like sideboard blues, everything from overcrowded to like there's like warmongers in there, there's the legendary gem, there's throw daggers, and I don't think that they're playing all of them, but it seems like they kind of have this toolbox of sideboard blues that they're playing. The other deck had like 9 D-reacts, so quite different. And then looking in Hamburg, the Syndra that made semifinals deck was really wild. There was like, I think the deck plays roughly 12 blues. It has Command and Conquers. It has Enlightened Strikes. Perhaps a little more tech for the mirror, being able to play like these smaller disruptive hands and block really well. This player actually did win their quarterfinals match against the Syndra mirror, but I think gives up some points into the Verdance matchup, as that game against Arthur looked. I think the deck didn't cooperate, but it also looked like yeah, there were there was quite a few 3-card 8s and that sort of thing, which is not where you want to be as an aggro deck against Verdance.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. It's kind of interesting. So there's a lot of different Syndra lists out there, and playing a lot of different cards.
Yeah, I think there's like sort of like a core of cards. Your ignites, all your draconic starters, a lot of your fealty makers that everybody agrees are these are cards that should be in Syndra. And then after that, maybe like 45-ish card core. It's like a whole bunch of stuff you can put in, and a very open question of what should be in there. And I'm currently exploring that myself. I'm hoping to have something released for the Patreon. But yeah, there are a lot of ways to build Syndra, and a lot of them, they kind of all seem at least pretty good. So
Yeah, I agree. I played Syndra this week, and it felt really good. Like the deck felt really, really strong. So yeah. Okay. Then do you want to move on and quickly touch on the PQ Week 1 results that came out this morning?
yeah, let's do that. So a bit of a surprise. First place, Gravy Bones, Shipwrecked Looter at 15 wins. I expected Gravy to do well. I did not expect him to be first place. Following Gravy, we have Syndra at 14 wins. We've been singing Syndra's praises. Verdance at 11 wins, another deck that we're high on. And then we see a whole bunch of other decks also picking up some wins. Florian at 9, Kasai at 8, Kano at 6, KO at 5, Dio at 5, and then a whole bunch of heroes at 3, 2, and 1 wins. Basilio, Prism, Arachne, Marionette, Fang, Dory, Katsu, Yarrow, Riptide, Slippy even getting a win. So yeah, a whole bunch of decks seeing success, but really kind of those big decks we talked about: Gravy, Syndra, Verdance, Florian, and then some of the other tier 2 decks. And I think KO is firmly in that sort of like tier 2 range as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. The thing that I'm kind of curious about is like how many of these like PQ wins were like actual PQ wins, and how many of these were like, they got conceded into the last round into the PQ win.
Yeah, definitely an interesting question. One that I don't think is possible to answer. Yeah, another potential issue with the way that the system works, right? I think you're always going to have a little bit of this going on, but it feels like, at least anecdotally, it feels like more of this season than previous ones.
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like to me. But yeah, no, I think what my take after playing week 1 PQ was that Gravy is like a really good deck in the sense of like people still don't know what to do against Gravy.
I've had a lot of people be like, what's the strong thing about Gravy? And I think at the end of the day, the strong thing about Gravy is that the allies are really messed up. If you get the ally into graveyard and it's like this sort of like pseudo free card, they're all ridiculously above rate. Like, I don't know, like Rigor Mortis is 6 damage and then they have to deal 1 damage to it. And even if they're like, I don't know, Katsu, and they can deal 1 damage to it with like a Kadachi, and that's like your best case scenario, you have like 2 resources for 7 damage, and it's not even really a card because it was in your graveyard. That's crazy. Chum's like 10 points. And all of this is not even counting the people often can't deal exact damage. If they do deal exact damage, you can blow them out with Fearless Confrontation. So sometimes they'll put like an extra point or 2 of damage in to play around that. So there's all kinds of ways for Gravy to get a ton of extra value. And yeah, I think ultimately, like, the allies are just super, super above rate, and they force you to answer them, or he will just completely smother you in value with them.
I just mean, like, there's so many people that I was watching some Gravy games, and I'm just like, wow, they ignored the allies this turn. And then the Gravy just, like, gets to attack with 2 allies the next turn. I'm just like, that's just not a winning play, right? It's like you have to clear the allies in some spots, and people will miss that. Or like the other way around, to be like, oh, they're supposed to attack the player, but they went to clear two allies and left one alive. Just like that's just not also not a winning strategy anymore. And I'm just like, it's really hard to have that like decision of like what are you supposed to do, clear the allies, not clear the allies. Do you
Mhm.
arsenal a card that you can swing at Gravy's face to make sure you can clear an ally next turn? Like there's so many, I feel like, misplays going on in against the Gravy, at least at like during the Swiss rounds, that I was getting kind of impressed with like how strong Gravy actually is once like people make 1-2 mistakes into it every game.
It kind of is like the classic illusionist board state thing where you need to make the right decision about how to handle their allies or whether or not you're supposed to in a given game state, basically every step of the way. And if you don't, it can really get out of control. And sometimes you are supposed to ignore them, sometimes you're not. It depends a lot on the exact board state, and the deck that you're playing also dictates this a lot, as well as your hand. So there's like so many factors. But yeah, you really do put your opponents in a tough spot. And I think what you said is super true, where if you leave him with allies, he can defend really well and leverage those allies to be way above rate and potentially double ally swing you. And if you clear those allies, sometimes he just converts 5 card hands really well. He still has Conqueror of the High Seas. We've been seeing Leyline, Prismatic Leyline in Justin's deck as a 3 of, and a lot of players adopting that with even more blue attacks. Like I'm seeing more blue Jittery Bones as ways to get allies in grave. And when Jittery Bones is a 0 for 5 go again, then your ally also gets +2. It's like, yeah, that's super real. And you kind of, yeah, Gravy puts you in this really weird spot. It's like you leave him with cards, he's scary. You ignore his board and let him block, he's scary. He just does a lot of powerful things.
I don't know what to take about this data other than that. Is there anything you wanted to touch on with this PQ week 1 data?
I think overall it makes a lot of sense. Cool to see Kasai doing well. I think we talked about it on our spoiler review at one point. If not, we should have. But Blood Follows Blade, hell of a card. 1 cost gives a sword go again, and if the sword hits, you make one of those Centauri Cell Swords. I think it's a 3/2 that pays 1 to attack, and it has go again if you've swung with a sword. So very strong ally, and I think that card putting in a ton of work. I think Kasai is a very interesting deck that we haven't really touched on today, but is pretty solid into Gravy, reasonable into Syndra, and then perhaps not the best into the Earth Heroes, but you're good into 2 of the 4 top decks. You have game into everything else. Not a bad place to be.
Yeah, reasonable. I am really happy with the Super Slam set. It kind of gave tools for all of like the tier 2, tier 3 decks like a chance to like compete again. And you know what? A lot of those reprints are kind of nice. They're powerful. They're not, a lot of them aren't broken, and it's just like I wish that like the following sets keep doing these kinds of cards where it's like, oh sweet, like Arachne Huntsman randomly gets a card that's like kind of insane, and maybe it's like a player now. Kasai finally got a card that like pushes it over the top, and is a solid tier 2, like tier 1.5 deck now. It's like I really been liking the expansion slot and how they've been power creeping the weaker heroes now.
Yeah. I think that that's a real positive, and I think Super Slam does a very good job there. I will say it is a bit sad that we don't see any Super Slam heroes pick up any wins. There was kind of some buzz early on about, Lyath, our first 5 intellect hero. We talked about that not quite panning out. Pleiades with these really unfair board states with what happens next, and sort of just like playing all these free cards. But I think ultimately, like the Earth Heroes and Gravy are kind of problematic for you. Yeah, there's like a reviled KO that did pretty well in calling Hamburg, but I think I don't know how you're beating the Earth Heroes. That seems tough. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if the Super Slam heroes haven't been quite figured out yet. But I will say that so far they've been absent, and I hope that we'll see more of these heroes, because I do think that they are very cool designs, although perhaps slightly underpowered if week 1 is any indication.
Do you just want to wrap up the episode here? I feel like this is like kind of everything we can talk about for the CC meta right now.
Yep, that sounds good. So that's going to be a wrap this week. So if hopefully this helped you out, give you an idea of kind of what to expect from the ProQuest meta so far. I think if you're on any of these top decks, you're in a good spot. If you're playing a deck that has reasonable game into some of these top decks, especially if you know your locals play a lot of those, like if there's a lot of Syndras, playing a deck that has a good Syndra matchup, great idea. But yeah, hopefully this gives you an idea of kind of like where we're at with the PQ meta and how to proceed forward. And if you have ideas about, how we can help you get ready for PQs and stuff like that on future episodes, please let us know. You can find us on social media and message us there. I'm at Yuki Lee Bender on Twitter, and Jay is at Ueda J. I'm also on Blue Sky. This is same thing at Yuki Lee Bender on Blue Sky. We have an email on the bobble at gmail.com. And we also, of course, have the Patreon Discord for all of our patrons, and that's patreon.com/on the bobble. That's going to be a wrap for this week. Thank you all for listening, and good luck in the rest of your ProQuests or Battle Hardens.
Do you have any sign off today?
Not really.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that right now. I was like, do I have anything to say about any of the sign off stuff? And I kind of don't actually today.
I want to play 2XKO. I've been playing it a bit. It's the League of Legends IP fighting game. Game's pretty fun. I am not very good at fighting games. It has very generous inputs, so it got rid of the motion control, so I don't have to do like quarter circle forward, half circle back shenanigans. It's just like direction plus button. Very good for somebody like me that is not very good at these combos. Seems like the combo timing is also quite lenient. Also very good for me as somebody that cannot do combos even when they practice them a lot. And there's also pretty generous auto combo, which again is pretty good for someone like me. I sort of feel like I can do a mix of the like I can push some buttons and like make sure it's not exactly the auto combo one, because like the auto combo one is like an okay combo but not great. But then like somewhere in the middle, I'm like, well, the middle of my combo I can use the auto combo and then like finish it off with something different, and it's like this pretty solid combo that's maybe not like optimal but is like pretty easy to do. And yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with that game. It's down for maintenance, and I think it has its full release tomorrow with some new characters. So yeah, I've been playing that. If you like fighting games, worth checking out, even if you're traditionally not very good at them. You might like this game. I think it's probably the most approachable fighting game ever, because I feel like my experience is like I've always wanted to like fighting games, and then I play online and I just like it's bad, man. I don't think I've ever been so bad at a game before, but like I remember playing Street Fighter 4 online, and I'm like, I think I'm like 5% win rate online. It's like bad.
Fair enough. Where can you play this game? Is it on Steam or is it like a client?
Yeah, it's a Riot game, so I think it's through their own like launcher and client. But you should just be able to Google it, 2XKO. Um, yeah,
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Man, Riot's been releasing a bunch of different kind of games recently. Like they're getting Riftbound, the card game.
yeah.
They have League of Legends. They have, the fighting game. This now, man, that's
They also have Valorant too. Different IP. It's not the League of Legends IP, but they did Valorant.
yeah, yeah. That is true. That
Yeah.
is true. Okay, and let's just wrap it up here then.
Yep. Sounds good. Have a good
Okay.
night, everyone.